Start now. Thank you. So thank you all for joining. My still people trickle in usually with time. So we have a great pleasure to have today Juni West, Linda Birt, and Martin Gardner here with us. They will talk about co-producing and attending peer-led post-diagnostic dementia support, a realist evaluation of the Recovery College Living with Dementia courses. And just a quick bio. So Juni is a mental health nurse who has variously worked with and learned from people with dementia. Is a ward-based staff nurse to clinical team leader and is now, well, has been a nurse researcher over the last 38 years. And she works at the research department at Norfolk and Suffolk NHS Trust and co-leads the discovery study with Professor Chris Fox. And Linda Birt is the Laureus Associate Professor in Palliative Care and Frailty at the University of Leicester. And her research focuses on how families live with serious illness and what helps them to live positively. She undertakes research with people living with dementia and their families who live in the community. In her work, she has heard many inspiring accounts from people with dementia as they find meaning in their lives, and she undertakes co-production activities to support people to recount their experiences. And Martin Gardner, when he's not telling jokes, lives with Alzheimer's disease. Martin has been involved in a number of projects, including making a deep, if you're familiar with the Deep Network, moments film called How I Look at Dementia, as well as a research project where people with dementia learn to play ukulele, something that has rather taken over his life. That's another story to tell there. Martin has been a member of the Discovery Partners in Research Group since the start. So thank you all three for joining us. Now, if I understand it right, Linda is going to start us off. So Linda, the floor is yours. Please start sharing your screen and over to you.
All right, everybody, I'll be there in a minute. There we go. So it's great to be here. It's great to see so many people and some names that I know from old friends and things like that. So Michael's given you an introduction, but what I would like to do is just to take us back to that point of a diagnosis of dementia. We often hear in the press and in the media about diagnosis and the length of time it takes to get a diagnosis and how many people have been diagnosed. And in research, we often talk about whether that tool works well for assessing whether somebody's got cognitive impairment or dementia. But this image here, I think, really captures the social aspect of receiving a diagnosis of dementia. Many people are nearing retirement or are retired when they're diagnosed with dementia, and often they're envisaging a path to the left of this picture of smooth grass, what they're going to do with family and friends now they have more time. But the symptoms of dementia and the actual point of diagnosis can shift that pathway, and people suddenly find themselves going down a way that they never envisaged, where the grass is rougher and they're not sure what the future holds for them. And it's at this point that people really benefit from what's called post-diagnostic support. That's the support that helps people assimilate that diagnosis and think about new ways to move forward. What we're going to talk about today is about a 3-year piece of work that's actually coming to the end, which was looking at post-diagnostic support within Recovery College models. And we're going to, first of all, Juni will tell you about what Recovery College models are and how they work. Then we're going to have a brief chat with Martin about his experience of working within that model. And then we're going to share some of our findings, some of the results from our study. We've had our introduction, obviously, but just very briefly, this is a piece of research that's been funded by the National Institute for Health Research, and we've done our work with a number of partners across England. And so I think over to you, Juni.
Thanks, Linda. I guess it's a really good place to start is to just have a moment to reflect on using the word recovery and dementia in the same sentence. And we know that this is a very unusual term to use in relation to dementia. But what we mean in mental health circles is that recovery doesn't mean clinical recovery or cure. Linda, you're going to have to press the next slide because it comes up in sections. Thank you. And we know dementia is a progressive illness. However, in mental health, recovery is defined as recovering a life after a diagnosis. So that fork in the road that Linda so well illustrated, where you have an idea of how your life is going to be, and then all of a sudden a life-changing diagnosis hits you. And there's so much to recover from there, recovering from that diagnosis, and then recovering a life after a diagnosis. And the recovery model in mental health focuses very much on people's strengths and managing difficult symptoms whilst also living a meaningful, positive and enjoyable life alongside those mental health difficulties. So we knew when we started looking at designing the discovery study several years ago now, we knew that there was some work being done and some papers had been published about bringing together models of person-centred care in dementia and the mental health recovery model. So there were some discussion papers that had been published around 2016 and 17. So this is really an emerging field in the field of post-diagnostic support, and we looked more closely at the literature. And we found some evaluations published, and we found some conference posters and newsletters, but limited evidence, limited research evidence about what this might mean in real life and practice. So for the grant application, we talked to a group in Norfolk and Suffolk Foundation Trust who were running a recovery-focused course for dementia. We talked to the staff involved in that and their family and friend supporters, and they were doing this work in a memory service in our organisation. And people in this group, when we were thinking about developing this into a project, really talked about the impact of stigma on top of a life-changing diagnosis of dementia and being uncertain about the future, as Linda said, but particularly when your diagnosis and the process of diagnosis focuses a great deal on losses and things that you won't be able to do anymore, like you need to think about driving and you need to think about getting your affairs in order and you need to think about putting things in place for things that you won't be able to do or can't do now into the future. Next slide, Linda. So recovery colleges and how these are operationalised or how the recovery college model is operationalised in the NHS is through recovery colleges. And what they are is really about psychoeducation, adult psychoeducation and peer support. So recovery colleges are part of nearly every single mental health trust around the UK, and there's recovery colleges spreading across the world in different parts of the world. The model means that peer support and co-production is at the heart. So all the courses in recovery colleges are co-produced with people with lived experience. And the courses are designed to enable people to find meaning and purpose in life, and increase personal resilience, learn new skills and learn life hacks and self-management strategies in living with mental health difficulties. And the people with lived experience who get involved in co-producing and co-delivering these courses are known as peer tutors. And peer tutors share their lived experience of living with mental health challenges and difficulties, and very much work as equal partners with healthcare staff tutors. So healthcare staff tutors bring their years of learned experience of mental health and dementia and their years of clinical training and experience to the sessions as well. So it's very much about partnership working and power sharing, really important power sharing. Next slide, Linda. Oh, just at the bottom of that one, there was a brief mention of the CHIME framework for personal recovery. And it's this framework that I will focus on in a bit more detail in the next slide, is about, has been developed for adult mental health recovery colleges. And it describes the process of personal recovery. And these are centred around 5 interconnecting areas. One of connectedness, which is about peer support, social groups and relationships and support from your people around you and your community around you. Hope and optimism is about a belief in personal recovery and a motivation to learn new things and to have hope for the future, and focusing on valuing positive thinking and effort and having dreams and aspirations. Identity is very linked to overcoming stigma as well. So needing to rebuild a positive sense of your identity despite this very life-changing diagnosis, or any life-changing diagnosis in mental health. So you may not be able to fully recover, but you can rebuild and rediscover yourself within that diagnosis. Meaning in life, finding meaning and purpose in life, meaning in life, social roles, and having social goals. And empowerment is about having control over your life and feeling that you have control over life, with a focus on strengths and a recognition as well that there is some degree of personal responsibility within that, to sort of not sit down and let things wash over you, but to sort of go through a process of adjustment and learn some new things that might help you. And our model, our research has been really looking into the outcomes from that model in relation to dementia. So these are the sorts of people that are involved in Recovery College dementia courses. So if you go along to a course or get involved in a course, there'll be healthcare staff who facilitate and work together and find peer tutors. Peer tutors are people with dementia, and peer tutors can be family and friend supporters. And then there's people who attend courses, and recovery colleges in mental health generally are open to everybody. In dementia courses, similarly, we've seen people with dementia coming along, family and friend supporters coming along. Staff can come along as a way to learn directly from lived experience, which doesn't happen much in practice. We don't get those opportunities very much in practice. And there's usually some senior leaders involved from memory and dementia services who may come along and see what's happening as well. And some recovery colleges are open to members of the public as well, so anybody can book on.
Thank you, Juni. I'll take over now,
Linda,
and just describe a little bit about the study. You've got that background of recovery college courses, and what we wanted to do in this piece of work was to really understand what supports that co-production between staff and peer tutors. What are the successful outcomes of courses for people that attend? So in summary, what works for whom, in what context and why, so that people don't face a dead end, rather they can see a way forward. So the next slide briefly, as all researchers do, sets out what we did and where we did it. We did something called a realist evaluation. That meant we went along and observed courses, and we also interviewed people who delivered and attended the courses. And we looked at materials such as the slides and the advertising. We did it across 4 mental health trusts in England. And overall, we observed 5 different courses, and these were delivered in a variety of ways. That's the pleasure of Recovery College. Each one is slightly different. It's not a standard one-size-fits-all type of post-diagnostic support. And so some were online, some were single sessions, some were repeated sessions. And in total, we interviewed everybody who was involved in co-producing and co-delivering that course, which included 3 people living with dementia and 5 family supporters. We didn't manage to interview as many attendees, but we did interview 8 people with dementia and 15 family supporters. And just so you can understand our data a little bit more, I'm very briefly going to show you what we do with interview data and observation data in a realist evaluation. So this is an example where we're thinking about, our data shows us that peer tutors are co-facilitators. And so we want to understand the context of what we've observed or talked to people about. Then we want to understand the outcome, because by understanding the outcome, we can provide evidence to policymakers, to people about why they should attend the course. So that's really important. But equally, we want to understand what happens. Why do some contexts have positive outcomes and some contexts have negative outcomes? And this is called the mechanism. So this is just a brief example. If the peer tutor with dementia shares their own experience and how they found a way to live positively despite the difficulties, then those people that attend the course feel a connection and have some shared learning. And it's all about adult learning and learning problem-solving skills. And the reason why this happens, is because it resonates. So people can recognise their experiences in the experience of those people who are delivering the course. Essential for this programme has been working with our partners in research, of whom Martin is one. They've really helped us to understand our data, our observations and our interviews more. They've helped us design the study and they've helped us make sense of the findings. And so I'm going to hand over back now to Juni and Martin to talk a little bit about Martin's role, really. Back over to you two.
Thanks, Linda. Martin also, as well as working with Discovery, works with Rachel Litherland from Innovations in Dementia, which is a community interest company based in Exeter, and they get involved, and Martin's been involved in lots of different projects and things. So it was through them that we got to meet Martin and the rest of the group. Martin, I wondered if you could introduce yourself and just tell us a bit about why you see recovery colleges as important for people with dementia.
You forgot to unmute then. I'll give it a very brief history. As I was diagnosed in, I believe it was October 2016, with a diagnosis of dementia, which was, then I was told it was Alzheimer's. And within that 12-month period, the first 12-month period, I lost my wife, I lost my driving license, and I lost my job. So I was quite isolated out in the middle of nowhere. And with the support of my family, they encouraged me to move back down to Kent, which I did. When I arrived in Kent, although I'd been under the NHS up in North Lincolnshire, there was such a difference, because as soon as I moved down, within 7 days, the adult services was knocking at my door and seeing how I was doing. I was then invited to attend a quick meeting with them, which I did, and we went over a few things, and they could sense that I needed to have something to do. So they suggested that I went along to the Discovery College and join one of their courses, which had literally just started that month or two. And so I had a quick peruse through the paperwork and found the Living with Dementia one. Although I'd like to have done some of the arty stuff and learn to play the guitar or something, I decided to look after my health and well-being first. So it wasn't one much for taking advice from other people on how to do things. So anyway, I went off to, or I think it was shortly afterwards, there was 1 or 2 Living with Dementia courses that were run within the adult services, face to face. So I sort of raised my hand at a few meetings, said, yeah, I'll go along to that. I'll sort of speak to people, which I did. And then, of course, COVID hit. And I think within 6 weeks of COVID hitting, I was then approached by Dr. Elizabeth Fields of Kent and Medway NHS and said, would I like to participate in running, co-facilitating a course? I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. And this was all due to the experience that I managed to get from doing my first course face to face. And what I found was, when I first went to the course, I was a bit apprehensive. It's not that I'm an unsociable person. I'm actually quite sociable, but I wasn't sure what I was looking for. because the briefing I got was very brief. However, once I got there and I started talking, I managed to find out or put to bed some of the stigma. And that was the biggest thing for me, when people saying to me, well, you won't be able to do that, or you can't do this, or you can't do that. Now, I'm not saying that's right for everyone, because everyone that has a diagnosis of dementia is completely different. And they say that once you met one person with dementia, you haven't met anyone with dementia, because we're all so different. So anyway, I moved on to the course, and Elizabeth Fields and myself set it all up with the assistance of the Recovery College. And I wasn't sure what to expect, and actually on the course. And the reason I say that is because I have quite a cavalier, gung-ho approach. And I'm not demeaning dementia in any way, shape or form. But due to my background of the way I was brought up, it's scrape it off, dust it off, get up and move on. And that's exactly how I treated it, because the way I look at it is for myself. I was diagnosed with early onset dementia. I was only 57 at the time. And I thought, well, my life's not finished. Surely not. And so we set the course up, and I managed to put across to the people that, because everyone used to say, well, age is just a number anyway, and this, that, and the other. And through my lived experience, I could say to them, well, life doesn't stop just because someone says that you have a diagnosis of dementia. And although I did stress to them that we all look at it differently, but we were all on roughly the same path. And it was being able to talk to these people, and I'm not quite sure how to put it, but being on the same level as them. Although the professionals had all the knowledge, all the medical knowledge, what they didn't have was the expertise, living with it. I was able to put that across. And I always said right from the beginning, as long as I can help one person, my job was done. And actually, I'd done something like 7 courses during lockdown. And I've made some friends during the course, during the different courses. And they call me socially. They call me when they're not sure how to deal with, and exactly the same with the carers as well. And I had to be quite a bit careful with the carers, because sometimes the carers say, can I meet you for coffee? And I said, well, no, not really. You know, as a widow, and I thought, no, I couldn't have that. And it's just because I wouldn't know how to deal with gossip, because I still wouldn't know how to deal with it. So, but my point is a lot of information was given out to these people. And actually, when they finished, and the feedback was astronomical, and I couldn't believe it myself. And it was because I was so down to earth, and I could put across exactly what they wanted. And every course that I facilitated or went on, because I went on a couple of courses after that, just sort of keep updates with other people. What I have found is that just because you have a diagnosis, it doesn't mean you can't continue your life in a reasonable way. I mean, obviously, there are some limitations for everyone, but everyone has limitations. Mine is I don't drive, so I rely on a lot of people. I forget to cook some of my meals nowadays, so kindly my daughter comes in and makes sure there's something in the fridge for me. Dates and things like that. And so it was helping people and saying, look, well, I can't remember. I said, well, what would you do before this to remember? You know, and they say, oh, well, when I was at work, I had this. I said, well, and one of them came to my house, and when he walked around, he said it's like being in a school, because there's calendars everywhere, there's flow charts, there's sticky back paper with locked doors, don't forget keys, don't forget to turn the heating off, etc. So all these little bits and pieces used to help them. And moving forward with that, we found that a lot of people, once you sort of went through the stigma about dementia, and well, actually, you can do other things. You can still carry on writing, painting, drawing. You can still go out for a walk. There's nothing wrong with your legs unless you have a physical disability. And so it's not that you can't do it, it's you can do it. And I defy anyone that used to say to me, well, I mean, even my own children say, well, you sure you'll be able to do that, Dad? So, yeah. It was like when I'd done the ukulele project. I mean, that was 12 months of learning a bit of music, but we persevered with it, 4 of us. We learned to play the ukulele. We created our own music, and we had our research paper published. You know, so it's not that you can't do it. It's what we need is just that extra bit of support. Yeah, I'm getting lost now, Julie.
Thank you, Martin.
You've touched on so many things there. Yeah. I think Linda's going to follow up with that with a lot of things that validate what you have said from the data that we've been collecting. I wondered if we just think for a moment, Martin, that at the heart of recovery colleges is co-production, and we've practiced and tried to practice co-production in all aspects of this particular research study, this discovery study, and particularly looking at the data in quite a lot of detail over quite a long period of time. What's it like for you to be so involved in this research?
I think every part of it, it's all to do with, it's our voice. It's not your voice. This is our voice as well. So you're picking at our brains. You're extracting what you need from us. And as you can see, when you talk to someone, it is there. It's extracting it from them. And we do know. I get frustrated so many times, and it can be something so simple. Is I sort of get what you're asking, but I don't know how to put it across. The days are gone when I could sit there and spiel off a load of nonsense, but now it's just more nonsense. So it's knowing that when people go to a recovery college to do a living with dementia course, that the course has actually been put together by people living with dementia, so they will know where they're coming from. So it's not a scholar thing. This is people's life experiences.
Yeah, and that's excellent, and that's what we've got some examples of coming up shortly as well, about the real importance of people such as yourself, Martin, being involved in recovery colleges and co-producing those courses. And hopefully we extract information from you in a nice way during the study. Yourself and your colleagues as well. If it's okay, I'm going to move us on a little bit now, if that's all right. Thanks ever so much for sharing that, Martin. I'm sure everybody in the audience has found that really valuable, and the importance of people with lived experience living with dementia having that role in the course. So one of the first things we did within the programme was to do a review of everything that had been published about recovery courses for people living with dementia. And we found out lots of ideas, what's called programme theories, about what needs to be in place for a good course to run. I'm really quickly going to run through the next 4 slides because these are also going to be published as well in a paper. So if we've got researchers here, that paper should be coming out in the new year. And if we've got practitioners here, that paper contains guidance on how to set up a course. So if you're thinking about it in your trust, the paper will have some guidance. But there's 4 key stages. The first stage is people feeling motivated to do it. So Martin's explained to us how somebody said go to a course and then he was motivated to do it. There has to be that ethos and that understanding of co-production, of clinicians and people with lived experience working together. It takes momentum, as this quote says, and a belief from clinical staff that working with people with dementia is possible and also valuable. One of the things we've done within the programme is produce a series of guides. Again, they'll be available in the new year. And there's a guide for people living with dementia who might be interested in being a peer tutor. And we found lots of peer tutors were asked to be a peer tutor on a recovery college course by the clinician that was working with them. And this understanding that they could work together. So she asked me if I'd join her right at the beginning as the course developed, really at the very, very start, rather than coming into something a professional has developed. And they identified me as somebody she would be able to work with. And that's quite important, that relationship between people. Then actually delivering the course. I think we said earlier that recovery colleges are focused on adult learning in enabling people to hear what others are doing. As Martin said, he's got some tips on how he manages to live with dementia well or positively, and he shares those with others. So the format is really important, whether it's online or in person, that can affect who can attend the course. This was a family supporter who said, actually, I could only attend if it was online because then I can pop in and out of the course in order to support my wife who's living with dementia. Whereas other people said, I want to be in person. I want to be there for 3 weeks, and friendships are formed over the tea and coffee. So there's pros and cons of each type of delivery. And really important, particularly if we're going to increase recovery colleges as a form of post-diagnostic support, is evaluating them. But that is so challenging because anybody here who's living with dementia knows that often the emotion is in the moment. And when somebody comes along with a questionnaire or asks you what was it that you liked about the course, it's really hard to then put that down. But I think this quote sums up what all of the people we spoke to with dementia said. I feel quite helpful. That was nice. When you've been sitting indoors and feeling like a blob, it was just nice to go out, to meet people who were living in the same way as me, to hear ideas, to not feel isolated and alone as I just started that journey of living with dementia. I'll put this slide up again because I'm going to slightly change tack now. And for the next 4 slides, what I'm going to do after I've shuffled my papers to find out where I am, is talk to you about 4 distinct examples, well, 3 distinct examples, and then some unintended outcomes. So you remember I said it's about context, what happens, and the outcome. And these are, I think, quite emotive experiences that people reported to us in the interviews. And they link in with the chime of hope, identity, meaning, and empowerment. This first context is an outcome of hope. And the context was, it was an in-person course and it was a one-off course. And the peer tutor with dementia had been talking about their good and their not so good days. They weren't selling dementia as something that you always live well with, that there are down days as well. And they were also talking about how they had a voice and they wanted to share that voice. So here the interviewer is asking somebody who's attended the course about what they thought about the peer tutor and what impact the peer tutor had on them. And the person said, I thought it was good. It's going to show the dementia people that they can do things. I mean, a lot of people think, well, I can't do nought because I've got dementia. And again, Martin, you said that, didn't you? And when he spoke, he said he was doing it. And it was like, I thought, you must be really brave. And this is really important now. But that's showing us lot that we can do things ourselves. We don't need to depend on everybody. So that slight shift in mind from being dependent because I've got a dementia diagnosis to perhaps being interdependent and being empowered. So having hope for the future and being empowered from seeing somebody else who is living positively and hopefully. The next example is about regaining identity, and people can often feel stigmatized. They can have self-stigma where you hold it internally, or other people can stigmatize them. And this case, the person who is speaking in the quote I'm going to put up was extremely distressed when they arrived at the course, highly emotional, quite weeping. But as the course progressed, so they learnt and their emotions were managed and contained. So she says, when I came here, I was scared. I was really scared and I didn't know what to do. I was listening. So she's listening to the actual clinical tutor talking about the causes of dementia now. And it was very interesting. And then I thought, right, I will have my say and I will tell them. So that sense of empowerment to talk in a group where she didn't know anybody else there. I wanted help. I wanted to put my mind clear what I thought dementia was, and I wanted to put that clear. And then when I met these people there, I knew it wasn't my fault. I'd done nothing wrong. And I think that's really important, that people can think they're to blame for their dementia, and that can really shift how you view yourself. And that, as I say, this lady was so emotional at the beginning. By the end of the course, she understood she wasn't to blame for her dementia. And we interviewed her 2 weeks later, and she was still holding on to that sense of, I'm not to blame. I can manage these symptoms. I can live a positive, hopeful life. So she had an identity reinstored. Meaning and empowerment as well. That's one of the chime features there. And so in this one, this is the peer tutor who's talking about why he does it and what he gets from it. So he says he does it because he wants to fire people up with enthusiasm. And people are peer tutors for different reasons. I know, Martin, you'll have your own reasons for doing it. It was a way of meeting people. And this person wanted to fire other people up with enthusiasm. But he also sees a role for myself as somebody with lived experience, someone who's living with dementia, but still able to speak, speaking to the staff who are attending to say, you know, this is me. I'm not somebody that you do things with. I'm not an object to pity. I'm a reasoning, functioning human being. Empowerment, identity. But also we found that when staff, NHS staff were attending the courses, they did shift their perceptions of what people with dementia could do. When we talked to them afterwards, I don't need to pity them. They do have value in their life. So that whole sort of shift is really important. And again, that's one of the strengths of recovery colleges, that they're open to everybody. You've got people living with dementia, you've got family supporters, they may go as a couple, they may go individually, but you've also got NHS staff there as well. And that sort of mix really encourages the learning that happens, and it's distinctly different from other post-diagnostic methods. But there are unintended outcomes, so that focus on dementia, focusing too much on lifestyle causes when somebody's already got dementia, and examples that aren't representative of attendees. All of those meant that they weren't such positive outcomes. And here somebody says, I don't think it related to me specifically or my type of dementia specifically, but I look around and I think, where do I fit in? And it's difficult to know where you fit in those cases. And this was particularly where the course had really dwelled on different types of dementia. And this person had frontal temporal lobe dementia, and that wasn't covered. So they didn't know where they fitted in. The final slides. These are our recommendations for inclusivity, how we can best get people to join courses as peer tutors or attendees, because we did find a distinct lack of representation from people from different ethnic minority groups in all the courses we attended, no matter where they were in England. We're increasing awareness of dementia courses, particularly with trusted community leaders. And one example was somebody had been recommended to go to the course from Age UK, somebody who Age UK had regular contact with that person. They said, why don't you go here? It'll help. And they thought, oh, yeah, they'll only tell me to go to things they know will help me. Culturally safe social opportunities, those ones that met over 3 weeks, where the food was shared, where the opportunities to talk about the garden centre that was accessible or the golf club that was accessible. These were all really important occasions as well. Location, you're never going to hit it right for everybody, but it's thinking about where is the best place to run those courses. And so finally, this slide and the images really capture what we considered were the most important things that came from our data. That when courses are inclusive and equitable, people with dementia have a voice, either as a peer tutor or as an attendee. The style of delivery facilitates people with dementia to have a voice and not always be silenced by others. That people felt socially connected, even if it was only in the moment. They had that time of being recognised, of having their voice heard. That there was hope for the people who attended, and that hope was grounded within the peer-to-peer support, an essential feature of every recovery college. And so we'd like to thank Martin for joining us here and all of our other partners in research. We have a group of about 5 or 6 people, and at the moment we're meeting them every month as we get our resources in place. As I say, the study was funded by the National Institute for Health Research, and these views are ours and not theirs. Do follow our website and the guides will be coming on. We've got some papers, but I'm going to stop sharing now, so we've got a few minutes for questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for this really interesting presentation and also for Martin's thoughts on this. If you have any questions, please feel free to come on either via your video or you can use the chat. Just type your question in the chat. Maybe I'll get us going. So I wondered, did you have a look at people in different phases of dementia and how this affects actually the recovery college, how it affects them?
Do you want me? I'm looking at Juni and I'm looking at
I'll answer that. I'll answer that. One of the things about the recovery college model is that it aims not to sort of push people into self-identifying that they have dementia in the first place, perhaps, and everyone is on an equal footing. So some people did introduce themselves and explain and tell a bit about their personal story, but it wasn't a given that would happen. So because it's open to everybody, and people were largely hearing about these through attending memory assessment services or follow-up support organisations such as Age UK. And we know that people come into contact with memory services at very different stages of dementia. So everybody's very, very different. And as Martin said, everyone's very, very different. And we didn't set out to find that out from people. So we didn't collect that sort of information because it was more important for us to just sort of see what people did and evaluate what was happening and see what came up under that sort of model and ethos, I suppose. So on working age adult recovery college courses, I know there's a real focus on sort of no lanyards, no introductions. Hello, I work in this service, or I'm a service user. It's very much sort of level playing ground. But it's a really good question because we did find that there were, you can pick up cues from people, or people had said that they were at different stages. And I'm not sure, Linda, it particularly seemed to matter for some people, apart from accessing some of the materials. And some of that was also due to physical issues as well. So, for example, having course slides that were high up on a screen on the wall that someone couldn't see clearly. That wasn't necessarily about dementia, but actually just more about accessibility.
I'm just asking because, as we know, that the needs of people are different between them, but it also changes throughout their journey with dementia. That's why I wondered what was discussed. But if you don't have it, you don't have it. It's very simple then. Fair enough. Great. Do we have any other questions? Don't be shy. Otherwise, I have to ask all the questions. Well, I think, I can ask another one, which is also very difficult, but there you go. So for me, it's always this dilemma, isn't it? Because it's one hand, yes, each individual has their own kind of specific experience and journey through the disease. And on the other hand, we want to make recommendations that help everybody. So how do we reconcile the two? That's what I always struggle with when it says personalized care. Is it reinventing the wheel for everybody, or can we make some recommendations which we know help a lot of people? We still need to individualize it. I don't know. Who wants to give a go at this? I don't have an answer, so please do give me one.
I think the phrase that we use is personal recovery. So it's the individual's recovery. And what we've found is that it's the way in which the course is delivered and the types of content within the course that enables people, no matter what stage they are on their journey of dementia, to take something from it. So some people will take a lot, and you can really see sort of even in the observations of the course, there's light bulb moments going on and notes being made. But other people might only take that feeling in the moment. But if that feeling in the moment is good for them, then we would argue that that was sufficient from a recovery course.
Great. Martin, did you want to say something? I saw you unmuted yourself.
I think that from my experience is every course that we ran online or in person, there was always someone that had early onset dementia. There was always someone in their 70s, someone in their 80s. And the group I belonged to, the Ashford Phoenix, there was 2 members there in their 90s. So it's once you get given this diagnosis of dementia, the courses are irrelevant in respect of what type of dementia you have, in what type of dementia you have. And the reason I say that is because when you look at all the different types of dementia, which I believe, quote unquote, is about 2,000 diagnosed, or I think it's something like that. I can't remember, but it was an astronomical number. But when you look at each person, so look at mine was Alzheimer's. I know someone with frontal lobe dementia, someone with this. All our traits are almost the same. There may only be one difference. And that was the thing I picked up on. And actually, when the person gets diagnosis, I always felt that if you're offered a course within the first 6 months, discovery college type course, and I've always said to people said to the staff that people should be encouraged to go, because it isn't about everyone has a different question, and almost everyone that come through the system with myself, all the questions are always answered, because if I couldn't answer them, the professional would answer them. And you found as well that they're related more to people living with dementia than they did the staff, because they know that they can get all the medical confirmation when they get their diagnosis, or they may not necessarily want to ask it at that point because they're in shock. But certainly when they come to the courses, and I'd always say I would firmly encourage anyone to go to a course, because you will definitely learn. There will be something in there that you think, oh, yes. And everyone has something to offer.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Martin. Great. I think my final question is then on the mode of delivery. So if I understood it right, maybe I got it wrong, you did some of these online and some of them in person. Is that correct? What would you recommend a mix, and how did you decide what would work best for which scenario?
For me personally, I preferred the face-to-face. I only got involved in the online because of COVID.
Thank you, Martin.
And I'm still involved when they get enough people. Yeah, sorry.
No, that's great. So across England, the courses we observed, we sort of purposely selected location, and then we purposefully selected the mode of delivery as well. So each trust will, or each recovery college will decide how they're going to deliver. From the observations that we did, the ability and the opportunity for people with dementia to contribute was far greater within the in-person courses than it was in the online courses, where actually each person with dementia was supported by somebody else to access that online course. And I think part of that was that feeling of being safe. So in the online courses, often people would have their cameras turned off, and particularly staff members would have their cameras turned off, so you didn't really know who else was on the course. Whereas in the in-person ones, when they're facilitated by a clinician and a peer tutor, people felt safe. And then we had one example where somebody had not ever said that she had dementia, and with her daughter there in that course, she said, yes, I have dementia. And it was that safety net around it, I think, was so important.
Great. Yeah, really important. I agree. All right. Well, I think we'll let you off the hook then. So thank you very much again for presenting your, your study, and for Martin, your thoughts. That's fantastic. Charlie, could we put in the information from the Dementia Open Forum in the chat maybe? So yeah, so you can see in the chat, so we will have a recording of this talk made available if the presenters agree to that, and you can contact us via the email address, and we have the website where you also let you know when the next one will be, which will be in the new year, usually in February time, and so we'll be in touch for that. But in the meantime, just want to thank you again, Juni, Linda, and Martin, for a great presentation, and I hope to see you all soon. Thank you very much.